Okay, hiya. Okay, it's a beautiful sunny day outside in Cornwall, and I'm in my darkened little studio room playing around with log log footage again. Yeah, obviously, if you might have seen my previous video where I was kind of comparing the V-Log and the S-Log, comparing that to my so far preferred natural and cine style profiles. Obviously, there's a lot of people that love the log profiles, S-log2 and this new V-Log for the GH4. So there's obviously something to it, and yes, it does have more dynamic range, I realise that, but it does increase a bit of noise, as I've previously found out. Now, a bunch of people after seeing that video kind of said, look, you're not exposing properly, you need to be overexposing more to get the most out of these. I was overexposing, but you know, yeah, possibly I definitely wasn't overexposing enough to help eliminate the additional noise that the log profiles give us. So let me just stop flicking through this timeline. So I'm in Premiere, playing around. So first of all, this is the Sony A7s in the Cine style 4, which is obviously a relatively contrasty style, but I quite like it. I'm with the ITU 709 colour mode, which seems to be my preferred one after flicking through all the other ones. If we first of all compare, this is the Cine 4 saying it's correctly exposed by the camera, so that's what that looks like. And then if we compare that to the S-log2 correctly exposed according to the camera, then that's obviously looking a lot darker and a lot flatter. Here it is 1 stop over, here it is 2 stops over, and here it is 3 stops overexposed in the S-log2. Now, first of all, if we have a look at this clip here, which is 3 stops over, we can see that where the sun's catching the carpet there, that information is completely lost. You know, if we bring the highlights and the whites down, or if we just, let's just reset those, just bring the exposure right the way down, we can see that information is definitely completely lost in 3 stops over, as you would expect. That is very overexposed, and that's bright sunlight hitting a bit of, you know, a relatively dark scene. But in 2 stops over, it's actually mostly still there. That's not what I want to be doing. I want to be touching that, excuse me. And then if we bring the exposure down, on the 2 stops over clip, you can see that bright sunlight hitting that carpet. There's still a fair amount of information in there, which is obviously also explained in the in our levels over here. So we can see that it's starting to clip, but there's still a lot of highlight information which is still retained, you know, in these bright areas. And you really, from my experience, from my limited experience, I'm no expert on any of this stuff. I'm just doing my own experiments to figure out what, you know, profiles I want to stick to. Because we're forced to 3200 ISO in the S-log2 in the A7s. I know everyone says the A7S is a fantastic low light camera, high ISO camera, yada yada yada. It still introduces noise when you bring the ISO up, but, you know, compared to 200, it's just quickly popped to 100%, and look at the dark areas on this cat. So this is a 200 ISO. We can't see any noise whatsoever, and I know you're getting compressed YouTube, but I can't see any noise in the darks there at all. You have to really hunt around, or you know, crank up the exposure or something to get it to do anything. Whereas if we have a look at our S-log2, let's just make sure I've got all these back to where they should be. Yeah, with the 3200 ISO, if we bring it, actually, if we just have a look at the correctly exposed according to the camera S-log, there's quite a lot of dancing noise in all of these dark areas here. It's not terrible by any means. You know, the Sony really can handle 3200 without too much of a problem, but it's there, and I don't like it. So yeah, my goal is to figure out exactly how much to overexpose my footage. And I seem to be finding that this, with a scene like this, with very, very bright highlights and some relatively dark areas of the cat here in the shadow, 2 stops over seems to be ideal. So if we then have a look at what I've done to that. So this is the same S-log, but I've done a color correction on it just by eye in the basic corrector. Basically brought the contrast up, the shadows up, the whites down, and the blacks down. And I'm basically just looking at my levels over here, and I'm adjusting everything so that I can tell that I'm just starting to clip the darkest darks and just starting to clip the whitest whites. And then I've also increased the saturation a lot because I'm in the S-gamut color mode, which is a very desaturated color mode as well. Anyway, so that's what that looks like. My favorite pick of the S-logs in terms of the least amount of noise because of the overexposure, but then not clipping these highlights. So if we turn my basic correction on and off there, you can see I'm regaining a fair amount of information in these highlighted areas on the carpet. So I'm regaining a bit of information there, and I'm also retaining tons of lovely information in the shadows. I know you can just get loots for this, and I've been trying putting loots for the S-logs on, and I just prefer to do it by eye basically. So and yes, I know it's just me playing around with sliders. There's not too much science to it, but I'm judging it by eye, and I'm trying to do the best I can with a sort of analog approach to it, if that makes any sense. So anyway, so with this 2 stops overexposed S-log, I'm actually getting really quite nice results. There is more noise in there than what there is with the Cine 4. This is the Cine 4 at 200 ISO. This is what I would normally prefer to use. And if we have a look at what I've tried to do here, I've tried to regain information in those whites, and I have lost that information. That is information that is gone from the Cine 4 profile, with the camera telling me that that is correctly bang on exposed. If we have a look at it out of camera, as you can see, I've regained a bit of information there, but I've sort of hit a ceiling. If we have a look at the unmodified clip, we can see that the highlights are definitely really getting their heads bitten off right there. But I can pull it back a bit to retain a bit of information, and I've also brought the shadows right up, because all of these dark areas that, in my opinion, to my taste, are a little bit too dark and that's too contrasty. It looks a bit like video from 1995. It's just too contrasty. Again, it's subjective. Lots of people like that very dramatic, contrasty look. I personally like it to be a little bit more meeting somewhere in the middle. So I've taken the Cine 4 profile and I've kind of brought it a bit more towards what the S-log's doing, basically. So the best of the Cine 4, which is that one, graded, and the best of my takes of the S-log, which is that one. If I have a look at the dark areas, which is where the S-log has given us noise, obviously the Cine 4 profile, graded, because I brought the shadows up, it has introduced a tiny bit of noise, visible noise, but certainly nothing that is probably even going to come across on YouTube, to be perfectly honest with you. And then let's have a look at our graded S-log2, and there is more noise there. There is more noise in the S-log, and if you look at, if I flick from that one to that one, you can see that I've graded them pretty damn closely. They look like practically the same profile after my grade. So there's definitely, even though I've done the 2 stops overexposed, which I think is probably about bang on for the S-log in this particular shot, and I've graded them to bring them up to a level where I want them to be, I'm still getting more noise in the S-log2 than I am in the Cine 4 at 200 ISO. Remember, it's the ISO which is causing this noise. It's not the camera profile. But the camera profile forces the ISO, obviously. So, but as I said, I have regained that information from those highlights. I have kept that information in the S-log. So if that was a highlight hitting someone's forehead or face, and you just didn't get the exposure quite right, and it was blown out, in the Cine 4 you wouldn't be able to get that information back. It has gone. Like I say, I've recovered it a bit, but that's as far as I can get it. I mean, if we have a look at the original untouched clip and just bring the exposure right down, you can see that is, I can't get any more detail out of that highlighted area. But the S-log's kept it. So again, it's similar to my original thoughts on this. It's half a dozen of one and 6 of the other once more. I'm certainly, now I'm overexposing by 2 stops, I'm way more impressed with the S-log2 than I was previously, when I was probably just overexposing by about 1 stop in my last test and video upload that I put up. So, it's better, and yes, I agree, I did do that wrong previously, a bit wrong, not massively wrong, and I am more impressed with these results. But I'm still not impressed with the introduction of noise, and I know it's going to be hard to see, it probably won't even come across on YouTube, but in all of these dark areas in that S-log2 graded clip, there is a very slight dancing bit of noise, which just bugs the hell out of me, and I don't know if it's worth having that just to regain that blown out bit of highlights there, which admittedly, if that was on someone's face, on an actor's face or whatever, a documentary, a real person's face, and it was overexposed, then it would look hideous if it was look like that. And this looks a lot better, but hopefully you would realise that you've got some highlights hitting a face, and you'd bring your exposure down a bit and try to compensate for that anyway, or get the bugger's shiny head out of the bright sunlight, which would be even better again. So anyway, my conclusion is yes, S-log2 is looking better now. I'm actually using it a bit better. I'm exposing my shots a bit better, but I'm still not super impressed with the addition of the noise. Okay, so that's the S-log. Let's also quickly talk about the Sony for a little bit longer before I go on to the GH4 and the V-log. That pass shot, the last shot with the cat, obviously doesn't have much colour in it, so I also did some quick tests with a bunch of fruit in direct sunlight to give me an idea. So picking that 2 stops over, which seems to be my sweet spot for my testing, if we have a look at that out of camera, so that's the S-log2, 2 stops over, it's not looking too bad in terms of colour. But then when we add our grade, and I'm not doing a huge amount to that, I'm just messing around with the levels a little bit to get things how I want them, increasing the contrast a bit so it looks less like log footage, and I'm increasing the saturation just a bit. I'm not doing anything else to that one because I don't think it was a million miles off. But I'm finding that the colours look a little bit artificial. I mean, they look nice, subjectively they look like they're okay colours, they don't look hideous, but they look a bit artificial. If we compare that to the Cine 4, so here's the Cine 4, which is my previous favourite profile in the Sony. Yes, it's more contrasty, and we haven't got quite as much information in the shadows, yada yada yada. And my highlights are getting clipped a bit more, as we know. But my colours are way, in my opinion, way more natural looking in this, which is the Cine 4, with a slight tweak from me, which is I'm just bringing the shadows up and bringing the saturation slightly down, and I also moved the temperature slightly towards the cool because it was slightly, I thought it was slightly warm. And that's it out of camera there, so it's not that different. But the colours there are, I think, nicer than there. The lemon looks more like it does with my eye, that lemon in the sunlight. This lemon looks just too sort of flat and yellow. The whole area is flat and yellow, whereas this one's got nicer sort of specular roll-off on the Cine 4. So again, in my humble opinion from these tests, the S-log does make the colours look more artificial and less natural. And yes, I haven't done tons of tweaking into it afterwards. I've only saturated a little bit, but I don't want to have to be doing tons of fixing to get colours to look natural. It's not hideous. I think some people would probably prefer that S-log shot over that Cine 4 shot. But in my opinion, it just looks slightly like someone's coloured it afterwards. Like they've got a black and white image, they've done a good job, but they've coloured it by hand afterwards, so it looks slightly artificial. Like there's old black and white photographs from like the war and stuff where they've coloured them afterwards. It looks slightly fake because like the whole area of yellow is all yellow, the whole area of red is all red, whereas in the Cine 4 it's slightly more, let's sort of zoom in a little bit, it's slightly just more natural kind of as your eye sees them, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so that's that about that in terms of colour. It's not hideous in the S-Log, but it's not quite as nice as Cine 4. I also just quickly did a very quick test with each of the Cine profiles. Cine 1 is just horrible. Really don't like that to my taste. These are all out of camera, by the way, untouched. Cine 2, it's kind of just a bit, it's just too contrasty. The whites are all getting all muddy and lost and stuff. And then Cine 3 is not hideous. But again, too contrasty. I think my that's the Cine 4 out of camera there. I think my Cine 4 is my favourite in terms of it. I'm still retaining all this information in the light parts of the lemon and on the orange, and the colours don't look, you know, the colours look okay. They don't look insane coming out of the camera with the Cine 4 compared to Cine 1, Cine 2. And Cine 3. Anyway, so that's just a brief look at those other profiles. Okay, so let's get back to log profiles. Now, on the GH4, obviously we have this new V-log. Excuse me. Previously, as I've said before, natural is my favourite profile, even though it is quite contrasty. If we compare V-log coming out of camera, which is there, with correct exposure, and then the natural, we can see that if we look at our levels over here, we are losing a bunch of information, these highlights in the natural, and the blacks are very black. So it's pretty contrasty coming out of camera. So you do need to get your exposure correct in natural. You can't be a million miles left or right because you're gonna lose information. But we've got this very clean image with practically no noise at all coming out of camera. The V-log, because of our 400 ISO, which is relatively low, but you know, it is introducing noise into all these dark areas. Let's quickly look at same as the S-log. I would say that the noise level increase is actually, now that I'm getting my exposure correct in S-log2, I would say that the amount of additional noise, because of you using the log profile, is pretty similar. I think the noise, because I'm in 4K in the GH4, the noise is actually smaller and finer, so it's less of a ball ache in the GH4. Obviously, if I was recording externally, it'd be 10-bit and it would be 4K in the Sony, so it would be a different kettle of fish, but I don't have an external recorder, so that's a whole different conversation. So out of camera, I personally think that the V-log is slightly better, only just, but slightly better than the Sony in terms of noise in the shadows, even when you've exposed correctly for both of them. And I've also tried overexposing by one stop in the V-log, and you're really starting to lose those highlights now. And if we just have a look at those highlights, that information is really starting to go at one stop over. So your head, what I mean by that is the highlights, the top ends of the signal, they're really starting to get, if you look at our levels over here, it sort of hits a ceiling like quite a way before, you know, the 255 or whatever this is at the very top. If we compare that to the Sony goes, let's do it out of camera to be a bit fairer. The Sony, you know, goes right the way up to the 255, whereas, you know, maybe I'm doing something wrong, it's possible. But in the V-log, it seems to get its head cut off with these highlights quite soon. This is why we're losing this information quite quickly. In terms of, just on that note, in terms of what I've got the camera set to, just remind myself to make sure I don't say the wrong one. I'm just quickly looking at I think I've got it to 16. My memory for numbers is terrible. Give me one moment. Yeah, 16 to 2. I've got it set to 16 to 235 on the GH4, which I'll add a note, a hyperlink to a page about the luminance levels in the GH4. That's what I've been following. If I'm doing that wrong, please somebody tell me I'm doing something wrong. But I don't believe I am. Anyway, so get back to this damn subject of exposing the V-log. You really start to lose your highlights much after one stop. One stop it starts to go, 2 stops it's really gone in the V-log. So you've got less headroom in the V-log than what you've got in the S-log. If we have a look at these graded examples, so the same clips, so this is the natural, and all I've done to that one is I've just brought the whites down, I've brought the shadows up a bit, and brought the contrast down a bit. If we turn that on and off we can have a look. So I've regained a bunch of information from these shadows, not loads, but a bit, just to add a bit more dimension to Wilf the cat's dark fur patches there. And I've also brought some of the information back from these highlights, just so it's a little bit less, being seared by the sun. And that's just from the natural, remember, so this isn't the V-log. And then if we have a look at the V-log, and what I've done to it, or what I've tried to do, what I kind of found out from this, I know this is a fairly extreme example with bright sunlight hitting one area and dark areas in other areas, but that's kind of, you want to try and meet worst case scenario and hit it well, basically, in my opinion, when you're doing these tests. So my correct exposure one, I'm finding to be the best in terms of keeping the highlights. It doesn't like to be overexposed too much. I start just at one stop over on the V-log. I've really lost that information in the highlights, a bunch of that information, not all of it, but a lot of it. Let's zoom in to show you what I'm talking about here. That information, I've brought the whites right down. I mean, if I go further, you can see you don't really get that information back. I'll bring the highlights right down. There's enough information there to tell you it's still carpet, but that is information that is lost. Let's get it to fit a minute, and I brought the blacks right the way down just so that they're in the levels here. We are actually getting black is black. I know it's quite trendy to keep the bottom end of the blacks a bit higher so you can keep some colour in them if you want a nice coloured grade look, creative look, but that's not what we're doing here. We're just trying to grade it so that we're using as much of the spectrum as we can, and we've got a nice image coming out of it. Okay, hope I'm not waffling too much. I probably am, but I shall continue. So from these tests, I'm finding that correct exposure, according to the camera that is about what you want for your V-log. There is definitely, if we compare the one stop over, I have got less noise in the shadows here. It's definitely some there, it's without a doubt, but I've got less noise within these shadows than I have at the correct exposure. The correct exposure, I'm not chasing the shadows away. Sorry, I'm not chasing the noise out of the shadows away at correct exposure. It is more visible and it's less visible at one stop over after grading. This is, but like I say, you really do start to lose your highlights. So possibly, maybe two clicks over or just under one stop overexposed may be kind of perfect for V-log from these tests that I've done, in my opinion. Everything's obviously very subjective. And so my best outcome for the V-log, which is probably going to be that one. Let's just quickly compare that to my S-log. I mean, it's going to be down to you guys. I know they're slightly different shots because one lens is slightly tighter than the other. Sorry, that's the one I want. That's the one with the correction. I'm basically finding it easier to keep my highlights with the S-log than I am with the V-log. I'm starting to lose that the highlights with the V-log, and I would say that the noise introduction, because of the log profile, because of the higher ISOs. Sorry, I keep going back to the wrong one. That's the one I want. I would say it was pretty even. The amount of noise, additional noise, that I'm getting because of the log profile in the Sony is definitely there. I can definitely see that. Let's have a quick look at the next one. Here it is. Sorry, that is the 2 stops over. That is the one I want. My apologies. So the 2 stops over is the ideal for the Sony. There's definitely noise here in these darks that wasn't there in the 200 ISO Cine 4 footage. And if we compare that to our V-log 1 stop over, which is probably the ideal amount over, I would say it's really close. It's really close. I'll put a side-by-side up on the screen of the noise from my favourite 2 clips from each camera for these shots. Put them side by side and blow them up so you can have a look. And decide for yourselves which has got the worst noise, but really, really equal in terms of additional noise. Obviously the Sony, because it can handle the 3200, you know, if the V-log forced the GH4 to be 3200, it would fall completely apart. It's only going up 200 ISO up to 400, whereas the S-log is obviously raising it from 200 in the Sony all the way up to 3200. So but you know, just because the Sony can handle a lot more ISO, it still doesn't mean you want to necessarily add more noise for no reason. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the GH4 in terms of color change. So this is the natural. I overexposed it slightly because I realised that I could get away with it in this one, and I wanted to retain a little bit of that information. So this is out of the camera natural. That's after my grade there, so I'm not doing a whole lot to that just because I don't think it needs it. I'm just bringing the highlights down a bit and I'm bringing the shadows up a bit. If we turn that on and off, so that's out of camera. That's my little tweak. So I'm just making it slightly flatter. Again, it's quite subjective, but I'm just making it a bit flatter so there's a little bit more information in the shadows, and you know, a couple of little tweaks. And then if we have a look at the V-log, obviously the V-log in general is much flatter than the S-log, just so if you can't obviously see, then just let you know. And then again with the colours, with the V-log in the GH4, it kind of just messes all my colours up. It's just so frustrating. I mean, yes, I have got more information. If we have a look at these shadow areas, I've got more information in the shadows in the V-log than I do with the excuse me, with the natural and the GH4. But that's it coming out of camera. And if we have a look at what I've done to that, which is this, it's not a huge amount. All I've really done is boosted the saturation, and I've just shifted the temperature slightly warmer because I was finding it was going slightly blue with the V-log. Compared to natural, that is. So graded V-log compared to graded natural, there's not a doubt in my mind that the natural colour, let's zoom in so you can get a good look at this, these natural fruit colours, so that's like, remember with my grade on the natural, I've done very little. I've only actually just brought the highlights down and the shadows up and the saturation down ever so slightly, which probably is telling me I need to bring the saturation down slightly in the camera. But anyway, that's all I've done. I've not done a lot. It's not changing the colours too much. But basically that is what that lemon looks like, that is what that orange looks like, that is what that apple looks like in direct sun with your naked eye, or as close as you can damn get it, in my opinion, with H.264 video file. Then compare that to our V-log with my tweaked grade, and that just does not look like real fruit anymore. It's lost all the naturalness. It's just flicked between them. The apple's kind of gone a slightly muddy colour, and yes, you know, I can make it saturation, I can boost the reds, there's lots of things I can do to it. All I've actually done is just boosted the saturation, but I mean, that is showing you what the V-log is doing to the colour. So, you know, I know that I can fix it beyond this, but I'm just showing you what the V-log is doing to the colour to make it how I don't want it. So that's the natural, that's the V-log. The lemon, again, the same with the Sony log format. the lemon, like the entire lemon, it kind of went yellow. So you lost the kind of specular roll off with the V-log and the S-log2. So it's made it look like someone's taken a black and white photograph of a lemon, and then they've coloured in the whole lemon yellow over the top of the grayscale, if that makes any sense at all. Whereas in the natural, that just looks way more like a lemon to me. It's less yellow, yeah, and you know, I know lemons are yellow, but the roll-off has a much sort of more natural look to it. It doesn't look so sort of painted on. And the same with the orange. That orange just looks like it's sort of glowing in a really weird, odd, self-illuminated way, whereas that orange looks like an orange looks in sunlight to my eyes. So there you go. I know this is very long and I'm sort of waffling on a little bit, but I'm just trying to explain my process and my thoughts on the log profiles, if for no other reason to get your guys' input, because if anyone watches this who knows more than me, which will be no doubt a lot of you, I would love to have your input on maybe what I'm doing wrong to get what I want out of the log profiles, or just your thoughts really. So yeah, feedback is fantastic. It's kind of why I do these things, because I'm just learning this stuff as I go along, and as you can tell, and you know, I kind of just want feedback basically so that I can speed up my learning process. But in summary, without a doubt, the colours get a kick in the natural balls, and they start to look a bit unnatural in both the V-log and the S-log, no doubt about that. Obviously, if you're heavily creatively grading your footage to, you know, make the shadows all blue and the highlights all warm and giving everything a very cinematic look, then maybe that doesn't matter too much to you. But if you want things to look natural in terms of colour, the log profiles, from what I've found, really don't do a fantastic job. The Cine 4 in the Sony does a way better job of having natural. Let's find it again. Apologies while I just quickly find it. There you go. So that's the S-log2, and then that's the Cine 4. There we go. So that looks way more natural to me. Again, it's a little bit too saturated, but it's way more natural to me in the Sony than the S-log does. It's just mainly the yellows that went a bit tits up on the yellows. And again with the V-log, that looks way more natural to me than that. I know it's subjective, but I'm just using my eyes to give you my opinion. In terms of noise, they both introduce, the V-log and the S-log, they both introduce about the same amount of noise into the shadows, which doesn't need to be there. Certainly in the Sony doesn't need to be there, because the Sony is a very low noise camera anyway. Obviously the GH4 isn't quite as lucky on that scale. I did my test previously with low light tests, and I didn't find any advantage with the log profiles in terms of low light. Obviously I would say the best thing about the S-log is it really is doing a fantastic job of keeping these highlights not being blown. So if you have got a stupidly contrasty shot like this, then it is going to do a great job of keeping that information. The GH4 does it as well with the V-log, but not to the same extent. It loses those highlights quite quickly. Just in one stop over, I'm starting to lose it, whereas I needed to be almost 3 stops over to get the same amount of loss of highlight with the S-log. So I'm still on the bloody fence. I still can't decide which way to go with this. But as you can tell, I'm doing a lot of testing, and I'm still leaning towards the Cine 4 and the natural. I'm still leaning towards that because it's the double whammy of having less noise and better colours. The colours are more accurate, and there is less noise. You know, as long as you get your exposure right in camera. If you're getting shots with super contrasty sunlight hitting people's foreheads, all that kind of stuff, then yeah, the log profiles, they're going to help you out. They're going to help you out. So there you go, guys. I will stop my rant and waffle. But yeah, I would certainly like, and especially anyone who's like super pro in Premiere Pro or grading in general. I'd love their input because, as you can tell, I'm self-taught on all this stuff, and it's not what I do for a living. I'm an animator. I don't get paid to do this, but hopefully soon I will start to be kind of going down the live action route more and more because I enjoy playing around with cameras. Okay guys, well thanks for listening to my rant, and yeah, I will shut up now. But yeah, feedback please on what you think and whether you think I'm doing anything wrong. And I don't want to hear too much about use this loop or use that loop, because I've got a million loops that I've downloaded. And I prefer to do stuff by eye because I like to know exactly what's happening to the image. As you're changing each little level, I like to see that. It's just the way I am. I come from an art background. My dad's a painter, so I like to mix my paints manually. Anyway, okay guys, thanks. I shall sign out now.